This is Just Something About Her, a podcast from the Recount. This week's guest, Senator Amy Klobuchar. I don't recall a fall like this ever. You know, it's not, normally Congress comes back in fall. Oh, there's so much to do. You have to deal with the budget. Maybe you have to deal with reconciliation, but I just don't recall a time where the stakes are so high.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I want to start.
I really do think the combination of the flooding and the fires all summer and the need to move on clean energy and infrastructure and climate change, the need to do, I believe, more on immigration reform. When you look at some of the businesses in my state who need either temporary workers or permanent workers,
Right.
When you look at what people are struggling, still balancing their toddlers on their knees and their laptops on their desk and teaching their kids how to use the mute button on Zoom calls. And a lot of people are back in person. That's great. But we're still, because of this variant, we need to get more people vaccinated. And then, you know, what happened with Afghanistan, getting the refugees placed right now high on my list as a state that takes in a lot of refugees. So there is many things that are happening, but we still need to keep our eye on that long term of the economy, which to me means these Build Back Better agenda that's right before us.
It does not feel like any other time, and it does feel like we're at the breaking point in so many ways, with parents working from home and still having to deal with healthcare, with the floods and the fires that you described, you know, in terms of climate change, the Delta variant, and then there's this cascade of efforts across the country in trying to take away people's rights.
Exactly. And, you know, I was thinking as you talked, even though all these things are such huge challenges, I actually do believe we're up to it. And I'll get to Texas in a minute. I do. I was thinking, remember when, and I think you were in the White House then with Obama when he first came in, and remember there was a downturn then, and they were going through all these things, including at the time, the Somali pirates. And he said,
I would love a nice lean portfolio to deal with, but that's not the hand that's been dealt us.
And I'm up for the challenge. And I believe that about this administration. And I know there's all these ancient procedural rules in the Senate that hold us back, but somehow we found a way to pass major legislation in the last year to get through the pandemic. And I continue to have hope. But let's get to Texas.
Okay, well, let's do, because I do want to kind of step back to see, like, what do you see that's actually happening in the country, and you know, if you give us a little clue about how you think we deal with it, maybe it's like bit by bit. But Texas, specifically the Texas abortion bill. So some providers have said that up to 90% of women seeking abortions in the state would be prohibited from doing so under this bill. Can you explain why this bill is so alarming to you and why it's not just a problem for Texas? And I know that when you're on the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Supreme Court, this is sort of the worst case scenario for, it's not something I imagine kind of playing out this way, that the way we might face a Roe v. Wade test was kind of through this weird backdoor legislation and the Supreme Court getting a stay. But you had a very spirited back and forth with Amy Coney Barret during her, you've come to think of it, you've had many spirited back and forths with Supreme Court justices.
Justice Kavanaugh, yes. You're saying there's never been a case where you drank so much that you didn't remember what happened the night before or part of what happened.
You're asking about, blackout. I don't know. Have you?
Could you answer the question, Judge?
You all particularly talked about super precedents with Amy Coney Barret, you know, as it related to Roe v. Wade. So what do we need to worry about this bill, and how do you sort of see it playing out with the court?
Okay. As my daughter would say, that question was a lot. So let's start back with what's happened with the court, how we ended up where we are. You know, and I predicted this, that these Trump justices, 3 of them, adding to the 2 conservatives that are already on the court. And then you have Justice Roberts, who, of course, is conservative, but in this case, in my mind, did the right thing, even though he may disagree in his own mind on some of the issues. He did the right thing under the law. So you had that 5-judge majority in the middle of the night, in Justice Kagan's words, you know, less than 72 hours of thought, and they green-lighted, in her word, this law that clearly is unconstitutional under Roe v. Wade. Instead of giving what is called an emergency stay. And they've done that in 2015 and 2019 on abortion cases, one of them involving Texas, for egregious laws that were just as bad. But this one to me is even worse, and I'll get to that. So that's what happened. The court didn't give the stay, and now it's taking effect. You ask, is this just about Texas? It's not just about Texas, because you already have governors and conservative legislators in predictable states already saying, oh, we're going to try this now. We already have Mississippi. The Texas law says, basically when you can hear a heartbeat, basically in 6 weeks. If you don't get in, if you're seeking abortion services and you don't get it by then you can't get it, or you can be reported and get in trouble. So what does that mean? Well, that means that, as you said, well over 90% of women just trying to exercise their constitutional rights will be denied that in Texas. And if other states, which we expect will happen, do identical laws, it's going to multiply across the country. So why this law is so bad, which I just explained, what makes it even worse is they've created bounty hunters in Texas. They basically have said, oh, well, if you find out a woman is seeking an abortion, you can report her and get $10,000. That means a neighbor that happens to overhear something. That means someone who hears a private conversation at a coffee shop. That could mean someone who drove someone. That could mean someone who's spying on an abortion clinic or any kind of a health clinic that provides abortions. It's just simply outrageous. And even Justice Roberts, in his own opinion in this case, he said it was highly unusual and unprecedented, and that basically Texas was ceding their power to enforce the laws to the general populace. Those are Justice Roberts' words, and he is not exactly a flaming liberal.
The Mississippi law that you referred to,
15 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I believe it's 15 weeks. It would prohibit abortion after 15 weeks. That is due to be heard by the Supreme Court this fall. And that's what everyone was looking towards to see where this could all get tested. The Biden Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against the Texas bill saying it's unconstitutional as well.
Well, and there already has been one state court finding to stop some of this. But how this will affect, first of all, Mississippi, one of the things I said in my questioning of Amy Coney Barret was follow the tracks. And if you looked at her record, you follow the tracks, and it led you to believe that she was going to get rid of Roe v. Wade and those protections, basically. And I asked her specifically,
is Roe a super precedent?
How would you define super precedent?
I might have thought someday I'd be sitting in that chair. I'm not. I'm up here, so I'm asking you.
Okay, well, people use super precedent differently.
Okay.
And she said no, she wouldn't say how she'd rule. And there were some people who naively said, see, she said she was like, no, follow the tracks. And so if you follow the tracks from this case that we just saw with the emergency thing, that would lead you to believe that we're going to see trouble from my perspective, in that Mississippi case. Meanwhile, back in Texas, you do see challenges being launched. Ultimately, in the federal courts, this will go to a district court, to circuit court, and the circuit court is notoriously conservative. It covers Texas. So that was the court that threw out the ACA. And it's a pretty dangerous situation. And to me, to get to solution, so this isn't all admiring the problem, the solution is, yes, the litigation. Yes, what the Justice Department can do, and you just never know, right? And the court still hasn't decided on the merits. Then the second piece is we should codify Roe v. Wade into law. That is the simplest way to solve this. Speaker Pelosi has started that bill in the House. We have a similar version that I'm a co-sponsor of in the Senate. And what you run into the Senate is, of course, the filibuster rules. And I think we should abolish the filibuster. All those things I talked about at the beginning, immigration reform, we have Republican votes on that. We do, but we can't get to 60. Okay. And that's what you need. Ridiculously, democracies don't usually work that way, right? You've got climate change. Yes, we can invest in infrastructure, but we're not going to be able to put greenhouse gas rules in place. And yes, when it comes to a woman's right to choose and abortion rights, We're not going to get to 60, even though we have several Republicans, 2 at least, on our side on this. And so that's why I would make the case for abolishing the filibuster.
Thanks for watching. You can watch the full episode of Just Something About Her on the Recount, streaming daily, or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts.